Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of What's Up with Startups, where I discover with my guests what it takes to build and scale a deep tech startup, a real hardware startup, and what it takes to take it through the valley of death. So today with me is Maike Lambarth, CEO of Cyclize. And Cyclize is a German deep tech startup developing a plasma-based process that converts mixed waste and CO2 into syngas, the hydrogen and carbon monoxide building block the chemical industry uses to make plastics, methanol, ammonia, fuels, and more. And all this today is produced almost entirely from natural gas and coal. It's a University of Stuttgart spin-out founded in 2022, and Cyclize is scaling now from lab proof of principle towards its first industrial implementation with a 3,000-hour reformer pilot at Schwedt chemical plant. So with this, I'm happy to have you here in my podcast. Maike, welcome.
Hello.
Let's start from the almost in the beginning. The company started as a research program at Stuttgart, and you focused on splitting CO2 to make shipping fuels. You worked with two other co-founders deep into plasma physics. I want to ask you, what was the moment when you said, okay, science is really cool. Not now, we're going to build a company. And when was this moment? Why did you decide, okay, now let's go?
Well, when we were researchers at that time, we were developing a plasma technology that could convert carbon from difficult sources, mainly CO2 at the beginning, into something where we could bring it back into the value chain. And that was really fascinating for us because it is fascinating on one point as a researcher from a technology perspective, but also from a society perspective, because it really solves the potential problem that we're facing at the moment. And we realize that if we just publish this knowledge, it's very unlikely that a big company or even a small company, any company operating in a market would pick up this idea, invest maybe 10 years of development time and maybe 100 million of investment development budget to bring this into an industrial scale level. So the challenge or the question for us was to decide whether we want to publish that with the risk that no one is picking it up and then going maybe classical into the industry by ourselves, or taking this idea and bring it up into the industrial scale by ourselves.
Okay. So, but did you kind of, is it was a feeling more, or did you like go around, conferences or speaking with visiting industry experts and they were looking, okay, this is nice, but, we're not ready yet?
Well, I think it was on one hand, I had a startup before. So parallel to my studies, I founded another company with other colleagues. So I had this experience in you have an idea and you want to make it a reality and you have the ability to do that, right? So it is a decision. And I think everybody can do that if he or she wants to. So this experience for me personally was already there. And I think that also helped to push, but also we had the chance from this technology perspective to prove that we have the chance to really make an impact globally here. And I think we really didn't want to miss that chance, but we sat together and decided, well, this is a chance you can't miss. We really have and also want to make this a real life process in the real world. And I think the challenge, especially in the chemical area, is that you need to build incredible huge plants because the chemical industry requires so much volume in products that it's a really, really long journey coming from the lab going into an industrial application.
Okay. So this makes you a serial startup founder, the second
If
startup,
you
right?
count two as a series, then yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Looking
okay.
forward to more, maybe. Let's see.
Was this the reason why you ended up as a CEO of the startup, or you drew sticks or whatever?
No, we were talking about that. And of course, it helped that I had experienced how to employ people and how to build a company and a legal structure around it. But also, I think I was the best mixture of having a very grounded idea of the technology because I'm an engineer myself, but also I have a lot of joy in communications and meet with other people, finding the spirit together, building a network. And those are all skills that a CEO requires. So we decided all together that I can fill this position the best. And I also really wanted to become the CEO. So I'm super happy to be it.
Excellent. You banded up The team nominated you the CEO, and then what you're actually doing is what I see from my perspective is like a David and Goliath, story. So you are taking on like a market with over like $60 billion, I think. It's dominated by Goliaths like BASF, Linz, and they were in this business for over a century. So you are taking them on the home turf. And what made your team, you and your co-founders, think that okay, a startup is the right vehicle, to defossilize. Incumbents won't do it. And I mean, how do you view these juggernauts? Are you planning to take them head on, or are you planning to partner with them, with one of them? Maybe you sell out to one, you exit through these companies.
I think as a startup, you have very different structure and also very different culture, right? And that gives you some different opportunities. I'm not saying that they're per se better or more challenging. They're mainly very different. And if you play that right, I think you can get some advantages where big companies are struggling with. So I see it more as an add-on to the existing market structure than as a competitor situation in itself. And when we look back into the history, we see that all those big corporates, they have their own R&D departments, of course, and they're doing a great job. And they're mainly focusing, or they're very well doing in incremental innovation. So improving existing processes, getting more efficiency out of that. That is perfect job for an R&D structure. We haven't seen big disruptive innovation in the past coming from those companies. So when you think about the transformation task or the need of creating new technology that has a different angle or a different approach to the existing ones, I think the big corporates are struggling by the structure that they have built it. So as a startup, we have this advantage in being very agile, super fast. We can test a lot of iterations in a very short amount of time. And those are skills which we can play well. So of course we're smaller and we don't have so much budget, but we have those advantages, which I think have a higher value. So we are a real, not a competitor, right? I see it more as a field where we can add to the existing market. And of course, we are also partners in the sense that the syngas we are producing is then used by those companies, right? So they will be our customers. And I think in that structure, it fits very well, and both can play the advantages that we have from our structures. And in the best case, we work together and we can complement each other.
Okay. I can't say so. I find it like hard to believe that BASF, would say, okay, fine, we used to make syngas this way. Now we have this startup Cyclize came up with this wonderful technology. It works great. So let's just, there is another ocean, so we can just add on because we have another other demand which we can supply. Because to me, I mean, I'm not really expert, of course, in the market of syngas, but to me, it looks very well established. So if you bring in additional technology, which says, okay, now I can do syngas like that. So it will probably displace some existing volume, which runs on old technology. And that's that. I mean, as I worked in a big corporation, I understand that the problem you have with pushing new technology is that, okay, why should we displace existing technology, even if it's cleaner or even if it's like more efficient, because that one works and that one is risk free in a sense. So what makes you think that, okay, this will be add-on? Is syngas market going to grow? So you will be able to capture, or is maybe a regulatory push to decarbonize that you can kind of ride, and this way you are not really competing, but you are providing a solution?
Well, I think it's all of it a little bit. So the syngas market globally is growing. It's growing in different ratios in different regions on the globe. So the Asian market is growing much, much more. European market is not growing at the moment. So in Europe, most likely we will replace existing technology. That's right. But in Europe, we also know that we will be carbon neutral, net zero until 2040. And since it takes a very long time to build those plants and then to scale them, we have to start now. Otherwise, we have no chance in reaching this goal in 2040 anyhow. And also from China, we see a big push towards that direction. I mean, not until 2040, but 2060. So that's not too far away. And so there is a global push into that direction. And for the big corporates, it is essential to have access to those technologies. Otherwise, in 2040, they won't exist anymore. That's the risk
Okay.
for them, right? So they have to decide whether they want to be part of the journey and have a chance to have access to those new technologies, or they are risking in the whole business model that they're playing at the moment. And that's why I think it is a great additive that we can deliver. Of course, we could also have the strategy to replace BASF, which is not realistic for today, of course, but in the long term, maybe, who knows, right? They also had a core technology at the beginning, and then they were constantly growing, and they did a very well job in that. So that is a realistic option, of course. And me personally, I would love to build an ex-BASF. There's nothing bad about that. I think we would make that job well, but we also have other options here, right? And I think the playing this transformation well and also fast is much more likely if we're cooperating together. So that is the main focus here. And I think it shifted also in the last month and years that the big corporates started to open their doors and look outside what is happening there, how they can profit from those startup ideas, also from the mentality, from the culture shape, from the speed that they have, how we can find connections and benefit from both sides. So both the startups and the corporates are actively working on how to work together, which does not mean that it's very easy. It is a tough job for both of the sides, but both are interested in doing that. I think that's the biggest shift we have seen over the last centuries, maybe.
Yeah. Well, you just read so many things here. I mean, I would just love to go into many of them, but let me follow up with my intent and strategy. So the reason I pushed on this, whether you're competing or complementing, is that because the two things that sets apart Cyclize. I mean, first, you work with any kind of waste, basically. Yeah, you work with mixed waste, contaminated waste, which a lot of, mechanical recycling or like even pyrolysis waste they reject. And this is the first one. And the second one, you're promising syngas at a parity at a cost parity, at a price parity, sorry, with fossil. So you don't need any green premium. So that's why my question was, okay, if this is so good, I mean, taking things which no one needs, converting things which people need, but at the same price as this, that was the motivation. So whether you're going alone or you complement it. But you already answered that question, so thank you. But there is also an issue of competition. I mean, there are other ways to make syngas, clean ways, like, I don't know, the green hydrogen routes, maybe you could use that, or electrolysis with pair with capture CO2. Why you think your way is going to beat the other ones or is inherently better? And I'm asking this, I'm working in energy mostly rather than chemicals. And there was a big debate, which still goes on for some reason, about hydrogen versus batteries. And in the end, it became clear that hydrogen will never win this, just because of course, it's technically possible, but it's just never going to be. It's never going to match the price of batteries. So if we take this debate to syngas, what are the technologies, like clean technologies, you see competing with? And because you're not only competing with with incumbents, you're competing with other technologies, and why do you think your technology beats them?
Well, I think in the end, it all comes down to the cost structure. I think the unit economics are the hardest or the biggest driver in implementing a technology. So we believe that the hardest competitor for us is indeed the state of the art, which is natural gas reforming or coal gasification, because they are well established, they're existing, they are already improved in efficiency, they are safe. So that is a huge advantage, of course, but they're also running on fossil feedstock. So there are several technologies available in the sense that they are all more or less in the same development state, and they are all now going towards the industrial scaling, which is great news, I think. And it's also fair to assume that all of these technologies have a place in the market. I believe that it's more similar to the renewable energies discussion. At the beginning, we believe that we just need to identify which is the best technology, and then we don't need the other ones anymore, right? And now we realize, well, we need all of them, and we have different market sections where they make more sense than the others. I think for recycling technologies, it will be the same, and also for syngas technologies. But when it comes down to cost, we have a huge advantage because we're starting, or let's turn the other way around. When we use electrolysis as a benchmark, we start with water, then we split it into hydrogen, H2. Then we take carbon, maybe we use direct air capture or we capture it from a point source. So we have carbon dioxide, which is again a very stable molecule. We need to split that. And then we have carbon monoxide and hydrogen, which is syngas. So you need to add a lot of energy, which is all electrical, to break down those very stable molecules. If we compare that as a benchmark to the Cyclize technology, we need 3 times less electrical energy. And that, of course, makes a huge difference. And that is because we can utilize the energy that is part of the waste. Not because it's burned, that is a big difference. So there's no oxygen in the whole system. We're not burning the waste. We are reforming the waste, which you can imagine like a molecule chipper. So the plasma is shredding down the hydrocarbons. And by that, we can save a lot of electrical energy. And that makes a huge difference in the cost structure.
Okay. Which brings me, really cool. Which brings me to the nitty gritty of the technology and the scaling part. Because I mean, I'm not a scientist, I'm not an engineer, but I've seen a lot of engineers and scientists making things in the lab, which is just mind blowing. But 90% of them never reach any scale. So you already kind of passed that. So you went from a, what is 350 watt proof of principle, then you went to 2 kilowatt system, and now you're on industrial reformer. I stood close to it. It's quite impressive. What do you find hard as you scale the plasma reactor? So the plasma reactor is your core technology, and you said you're using less energy. So 3 times less energy is your cost competitiveness core story, I would say. But what do you see the challenges? I mean, in scaling this up, in making a bigger plasma reactor, or maybe it's not plasma reactor at all. Maybe it's the balance of plant, or maybe it's the feedstock.
I think the core guidance for us always to focus on scalability. And that's not always intuitive, right? Usually you try to build something and then you make it as big as possible. So you try to get as much out of one level, let's say, of a plant or a process as possible. And for us, the focus always was on the economics. They had to work with the current market situation. And from a technology perspective, the focus was always on scalability. So finding a concept that would work now, but also would be able to build it in a bigger scale. And that means finding suppliers. That means scaling the process or the concept itself. That means having access to the elements that you need. So we're not only building plasma, which means the reactor and all that hardware stuff, but also the power electronics. So we also need to have access to those power electronic models, right? To those elements. And finding a cheap and safe access into the value chain also is a very, very important key element here. So focusing on that right away when we started with this super small 35 watt reactor, which was like half of a finger from the size, and having now a reactor that is 4.5 meters high is super cool to see. And it's basically, the concept is still the same and it still can scale up much, much further.
Again, I'm not an engineer, but still what I saw in chemical processes, at least when you have a reactor, which is, a big reservoir of something, the moment you make it bigger, how things react inside change. So it's not you need to employ different stabilization protocols, cooling, I don't know, pressure management, whatever. So maybe, or it actually gets better if you scale. I mean, in one of the challenges in nuclear, for example, is that the reactor core in nuclear, if the bigger you make, the more efficient it is. Rather than the smaller you make, it's actually less efficient. And so there are two competing schools of thoughts, or maybe they're not competing, but they are applicable in different situations. Which one is applicable to you? So one is the bigger the better. So it's the bigger you make the plasma reactor, the better it works. And it's just inherent in the physical properties. Or the modular, the better. The more modular, the better. So you make modules which are standardized, which probably you can get this vessel, straight out of the shelf from existing supplier. And that's it. And you can just, replicate like solar. What is the way for you?
Well, we see modular systems quite often in the startup area. And I think that's because it's so easy. You build one small model and then you say, well, this is my final product. And if you need more, I just give you 3, 5, 100, 1,000, whatever. So I understand that this is a very likely conclusion that you could make. But in chemistry, it's very unpopular because the reactors usually are hot, not super hot, but they have a temperature. And therefore, it's always charming if you can make them bigger because it's easier to keep the heat inside. So for us, the goal is to make the reactor as big as possible and then manage the scaling of the plasma itself. And I'm not saying that it's super easy, but it's manageable. And we are understanding plasma well enough to understand the scaling factors here and how we can influence them. So we are focusing very clearly on making the reactor itself as big as possible, keep the heat management easier, and the efficiency will improve.
One of the reasons I'm asking is because it's often ties directly into fundraising. And I've seen a lot of VCs preaching the gospel of modularity. Like, if you're a hardware startup, be modular. Like, be modular. That's the mantra, which is good in some cases in physical world, but not really in many other, as you just explained. So let me use this as a kind of a bridge to fundraising. So you have a VC, you have a UVC who's led your seed round. But what's actually caught my attention that you brought Klaus Schaffer, if pardon my German. He is a former CTO of Covestro, and he's on your cap table. He's also on your advisory board. He's an industry heavyweight, and you got him very early, which I find unusual. There are like heavy industry heavyweights on advisory boards of startup, but not on the cap table as as an investor. What impact had getting Mr. Schaffer on your cap table and your advisory board? Did it change conversations, chemical partners, potential off-takers, suppliers? How instrumental was that?
Well, in general, we try to convince by competence and also results. I think that's also the reason how we could convince him to join us so early. So it's quite hard to say how that changed, right? Because I can't say how we would have developed without him.
Yeah,
Of
you don't
course,
have a control group.
yes, so that makes it a bit hard. But of course, we experience that people are impressed that we have him on board. So I think it does make a difference, even though it's hard to measure. But for sure, we love very much to have his expertise and also him as a mentor for us as managers and as a growing company in the chemical sector. So that for sure for us internally, it helps a lot. And it's a lot of fun to work with him. He's a very great person. And also, I feel that the outside world is reacting positive on him because he is a great human and people like to work with him. And that's nice for all of us, I think.
Cool. I understand that you're now building a plant, which is not like your full commercial plant yet. So you plan to do this in Schwedt, I think, a pilot, which you're going to run for 3,000 hours. And so you've proven the linkivity, you've proven the process. And then you're going to build your first, like, fully commercial first of a kind. So you're in this, after you post pilot, you're in this, you post your lab, you post your first, like, small reactor. Now things get hairy, I would say. You're not making revenue. There are many challenges ahead. What is your pitch to investors? I mean, I think I speak to other founders that they find that this is the worst time, to raise money for hardware folk, especially folk. And what do you pitch? How you say convince them? Okay, we're gonna build this. We're gonna test it for 3,000 hours. That's about a third of a year, and there will be stops, and relaunch. So it will actually take me half of a year, most probably. And then we're gonna start planning and building our real first of a kind one, where we actually get some money. Probably, yeah. What's your pitch?
Well,
How do you get them to listen?
we do it all at the same time. So we are commissioning the Schwedt plant at the moment in Stuttgart in our workshop, and the plasma is running already. So in a few weeks, we will ship that to Schwedt and run it there, fully optimized and with remote control, everything. But that's all tested. So we do not expect that we have a lot of stops in between. The goal is to run 3,000 hours right away. And if we have the chance to keep the plant even longer there together with our partner PCK, that's great. That would be an awesome option for us. We would love to do that. And in parallel, we are already planning the first of a kind plant, which is a commercial plant. So we could convince customers. And I can't give a lot of details about that at the moment because it's not yet public. But of course, having a customer who wants to buy the products for the next years makes it much easier to plan, to build, and to finance a plant because you're secured on the revenue side. So that is in the building or in discussion, and we're doing well on this side, and that helps also the fundraising process. So we are in the Series A fundraising at the moment, and it's really cool to see how everything is coming now together, those different levels and lines and different, also contracts, of course, that need all to come together at one place with the same timing as well. That is a challenging task in general. We call it valley of death, right? And I think we're coming close to the end of this valley of death. So this is a very nice time at the moment where we can see that all the work that we have invested starts building fruits.
Okay, that's nice. Nice to know. So I would love to go to your to how you got your customer, but just before we do that, there is one funding source which a lot of, I think 90% or more of startups rely on, especially in Europe, and that's public money. So what I heard from many startups, but not all, actually, 2 episodes ago, I had a guest on my podcast who's doing a SMR, like small modular reactor, and they rely on public money, and they were saying, okay, public money is fine. We don't have any problem with that. We don't have any extra. We do have some extra work, but that's not. The value that we get is much more than we put in. But then I heard other companies saying, okay, we like devote 2 people full time just reporting, and if we want to get another grant, then we have to hire a special consultant for that and spend many, many hours just preparing for that. So, how, in your case, in case of Cyclize, how decisive were public money to your company? And what does it cost you in time and energy?
I think without public money, we wouldn't exist because we were using the exist research transfer funding at the beginning to spin out of the university into a company. So that was a very important tool for us to use. Also the Schwedt project, and we have some other research projects running at the moment. They are super important. Also for the folk financing, that is a really important key element to not only rely on VC money, because most likely they will not take the whole risk on themselves, right? So you need to find this mixture financing path, which is also not easy because you need to bring again everything together in the right timing. Also the funding needs to start in the right timing, and you need like at least 1 year. You need to start writing the proposal, and then you go through this process, which is intensive. I would agree on that. So we have a team in Cyclize doing that who are specialized, I would say by now. We trained as a team. And of course, since we are coming from the university, writing proposals was part of our job before. So it's not a huge skill that we need to learn from zero, but we had competences there already. So for us, the challenge is much more finding strategic, relevant funding opportunities, grants that fit to our core development line. So deciding whether this is a nice option, but maybe not helps us along the core line, or this is something that really could boost us into implementing this technology in the chemical industry. So it's more taking those strategic decisions. And then I think it's very worth it to invest that time, even though, of course, we have applied for funding, which we didn't get. And that's always frustrating because you're investing so much time and energy. But the overall ratio, I would say, is quite fair.
Okay, that's good to know because I think somewhat despairing, but yeah, but it's good to know that in the end, if you get it, then it kind of pays off most of the time. Let's go back now to what you were saying about customers. So having a customer kind of unlocks the conversation with investors about your hardware demo, pilot, and first of a kind. Now, you are working in a difficult market. The manufacturers of plastics, ammonia, methanol, they're not known to adopt unproven technologies for their feedstock. And then they have like a plasma startup, they cold calls the chemical side saying, we have this wonderful technology. Would you want to try this out? Who picks up the phone? Who you talk to find a customer? If you could share like the story how you found your customer. If that's possible to the public, I would love to hear it. But otherwise, how you push your product, your technology in the market, such as conservative as this one.
Mm. I'm super happy to share the exact story of our customer maybe next year in another version. But I can share, of course, some insights in general. So we started to talk to the market very early in 2021 when we were just starting to think of if we want to build a company or not around this topic, because it was important for us to understand if there is a market demand and if companies would be willing to talk to us, right? And actually the hardest partner, so the idea was to find partners along the whole value chain to prove that we could build it overall. And it of course, it wouldn't need to be exact the same companies along the whole life cycle. So we could change the company, but at the beginning, like in 2021, it was important for us to prove for ourselves that we could find at least one partnering company along the whole value chain. And the hardest one to find was actually the plant builder, so the EPC, because they didn't
Okay.
want to talk to us. They said, well, you have just that idea. You're just researchers at a university. It will take you years until you can build a plant, which is actually true. But still, we needed to be sure that we could find a company who would build this plant with us together. So that was the hardest call we had. And surprisingly, also for me, that was surprising. The chemical industry was not so hard to contact. It is okay possible to contact one of those big corporates and you will get a first contact. The question is in which division, in which business unit you will enter, and if that person is willing, of course, but also has the approval to talk to you. Is that one of the job descriptions of this person, identifying a startup? And if that is the case, that's great. Then you have found the right person you need to talk to at the beginning, but that's most likely not the person who will sign the contract with you later on, right? So your started journey in a huge corporate, going from business unit to business unit. So you talk to the innovation managers, to the sustainability managers, to the business developers. You start to talk to the technicians. You talk to the procurement center. So you're talking to a bunch of people and they have all very, very different interests. They have all very, very different jobs, of course. And that's fair. And they start to challenge again the whole concept, the whole idea, the whole technology from their angle. So you need to convince so many people until you come to a group of people who can actually take this decision. It takes you months and years. That's very normal. It also took us years to come to this decision. So it is very important to start very early on and to give the corporates the chance to grow with you together, to build a relationship, and also to form trust in this relationship. I think that's a very key element, and that's not possible in a short amount of time. So you need time and you need to build this relationship over months and years, and that means you need to start early.
You mentioned a person in a corporation, which is instrumental to getting the startup actually signed off by a corporation. I also had similar experience. And how you find that person. You said something very specific. You said, okay, they should be like in his job description or her job description, like you're looking for startups. But there are so many, there are so many people, like sustainability managers could be there, supply chain, procurement also could be there, strategy departments could be there, R&D center could be there as well. But how you actually find a champion, I would say, who would actually, point you to the right doors, take you by hand, through the corporation, then bring you to the decision makers, and then whisper in the decision makers, say, yes, these guys are good. I've seen them work. These guys are good. So he kind of stakes or she stakes the reputation on you. Is that true? Is this, you kind of encountered such a person? You found that person, and if you did, how you did that? Or is it you just go door by door, look at the the business card, and then start talking, and then it kind of gets pulls together. What was your experience?
I think if you're able to find such an in-house enabler, this is incredible and it speeds up the whole process a lot. But it also means that this person wants to do that. And that's also a political question because people usually have their own strategy for for their career, for example. They are in a group within the company. They have culture rules, what you can do and what you can't. They are liked or not liked by other colleagues. And this is something you cannot see from the outside, right? So even though you find something who tries to enable you in the company, this might be a person who's not very well liked or who is very much liked but doesn't want to take the risk. And I can't even say if it's good if this is a young person or an old one. Both can help or not help, right? So this is super individual, and it's really hard to find a rule that fits to all of those companies. But of course, enabler helps or can help a lot. But even if you don't find an enabler, it is possible to step through all of those units and find your way through it. We have experienced also a lot of people change in the
Yes.
corporate. So the person is doing a career step or maybe is leaving the company. There's happening a lot. Then the company strategy is changing. Maybe the management has changed, right? Then they have a different strategy or they start to save jobs or money so they can't travel anymore, whatever crazy things had happened in the last month and years. And that's also what I'm hearing from other startups. So it's not only an individual experience. I think that's a general one. I think the main rule is that there is no rule, unfortunately, and it's very, very individual. And that's why it's also important to have not only one company where you put your bet on, but have as many as possible, as many as you can handle also, right? Because, I mean, I don't have 100 people who can do relation management with different companies. So that's something that needs to work all in the same place, of course, but it's helpful if you have several contacts and partnerships in place. And then also a network, of course, who can help to evaluate the person you're talking to, which level is that, how the organization is structured. And that's all not public data, right? You need to find that right on the journey. So it helps if you meet people in real life, if you meet face to face, and if you can manage to have a meal together, that's an incredible chance to also ask questions that you can't ask in a business meeting context. So try to meet the people in person and try to have a meal or maybe a drink together. That helps a lot building this relationship and getting some insights, which can be helpful for your strategic decisions.
Yeah, I fully support that. Okay, let's zoom out from a single person helping you succeed and zoom out a lot to partnerships and supply chains that enable what you do. You mentioned EPC, right? As a partner who kind of helped you a lot in bringing this to life. But then you also have other part. You should be also having other parts like waste sourcing, logistics, getting the waste to your plant. Okay, you have the customer we talked about, you have the offtake. Then you have all the equipment suppliers who should be ready, stand ready to ship you consistent quality of the power electronics, of vessels, piping, cabling, everything. As you scale, how much you find yourself focusing more on your core technology, plasma hardware, to managing all of the ecosystem. I mean, I've seen cases when the core technology is taking like 5-10% of CEO time. Actually, what you do is orchestrating the whole ecosystem around it. And you actually, okay, if this is your CTO who's actually taking care, and even the CTO is busy with integrations rather than the core technology. So how that ratio changed when you started scaling?
We organize our company around products. So we have internal products that we develop and also build ourselves. That is the power electronics and the plasma units. Then we have several plants running. And then we have a team who is taking care of the industrial engineering. And they also have engineering and industrial experience, right? That is also important, not having only academia people. They're awesome and great in developing and they can combine a lot of things. And we're very much focusing on this interdisciplinary teamwork that helps a lot. I think that's a core competence of our team. But we also mix that together with industrial experience, which helps a lot also to interacting with the outside. So in general, we focus on developing and scaling the core elements and getting as much as possible to experts that are already experienced in the outside, as an EPC, for example, but also a lot of different suppliers where we are in great contact. We made sure that all of the core elements that we need to build a plant, we have several suppliers for. That is part of the strategy. But in the long term, of course, we want to integrate as much as possible vertically and have more of those elements internally covered. So it is really the strategic decision, which timing is the right timing for covering what. So at the beginning, the focus was understanding that everything is in place, everything is available, but we as a company focus on the core elements, and then we start to grow further and further, building the competences internal.
Okay, so that's cool. And when you said about growing competence internally, I mean, you're about 20 people now, right? So you went from 4 to 20.
We're
Yes, correct?
25 now, for idea.
25. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
It's great.
that's new.
So how big you plan a team for your next step? How many people would you add?
The last month, we were growing by the factor of 5. That was
Mm,
quite a lot, I would say, from an organization point of view. So for the next year, we want to double. So end of 27, we will be 50 people, focusing on the engineering still, but then also the work is more going towards building and also operating an industrial plant. So also the core competences will shift or will get bigger or diverser. So I think that's also a great chance from a development perspective as a company. I'm very much looking forward to that. And yeah, I think it will change all the time, and that's fair. We will also start to have several sites. At the moment, we're all in Stuttgart, but of course, we will then start to move part of the team also towards where the plant is operated, which is not yet public, but then we will have 2 locations, which is again a new challenge. And it's really cool to see all those different elements and then identify what are the ways to bringing all of that together. And you always have the option to copy what the big corporates are doing. And we're always questioning how they're doing that and why. What part is that solving, and is it worth it to copy that? Then that's perfectly fine. There's nothing bad about copying, I think. But sometimes we also decide to do that very much different because we think it works better for us, or it's more healthy for us as a team. So that's very much joy to develop that together as a team.
how you keep them all on the same page? I mean, you scale 5 by a factor of 5. Now you're going to scale by a factor of 2 or 3. I mean, it's easy to communicate when you have like up to 10 people. So basically everybody is on the same page. But even then I've seen that fail. How do you keep everybody on the same page?
I think it is very important to talk to each other, not only on like a technical or like a business level, but also on a human level, right? We have specific time slots where we talk only about how we are working together, what is stressing me at the moment, what is bothering me, maybe what I would like to see different. And that helps a lot to grow not only the technology, but also the team, and making sure that we can work well together enables us to be very fast and productive. So that is a very important part that we have implemented very, very early when we were only the 4 founders of us, but it's also a key element now as we are growing. And then we're hiring only people where we would love to work with. And that works very well for the overall team as well. And they're super different characters, but all lovely people. So we're super happy to have such amazing people on board.
Okay. The point about, setting up aside the specific time slots, I think it's important because it's very easy to get bogged down in putting out fires all the time. Yeah. So setting up space where you can quietly, with no rush, discuss things that matters with your team and then
Yeah.
get them
And
get
it's
them to
really not
understand everybody's
easy.
perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really hard to take that time. I mean, you can book a slot, of course, and then other things are happening and you're stressed and you think, well, maybe we could just skip this part because we really want to solve this problem now. And it's so hard every time that we said no. We said it's important to work on the team as well. We will set this time and we will fight for it and do it, even though there's many, many different topics who are also urgent at the moment. So in reality, or I think on paper it looks great and easy, but in reality it's quite hard. But I think it's such an important element to success that I really can only
Yeah.
advise people to do it.
Okay. And this brings us nicely as to the last question I always ask my guests is from the point of view you're now, I mean, if you could go back to founding Cyclize and you could tell yourself that one piece of tactical advice, like really, really detailed tactical advice, and maybe one warning for a deep tech founder. So what would you say to yourself?
Well, my main advice, I think, is to celebrate the small but also big achievements. Maybe it's a cultural habit, but we're not super well in doing that. I think we always have some bottles to celebrate in the fridge, but it's not happening too many times that we take them out, really sit down and celebrate. So yeah, we're trying to implement some structures to use confetti, for example, or have a glass of a drink and celebrate together. But I think it helps a lot to not forget what we have achieved already. And that is such a strength that it's a core competence, I think. And I'm not sure if we have done that often enough. I think that's something we can improve on. And yeah, it's a resource that we can further develop. And the wording for sure is what we have talked about, investing in the team as much as you're investing in the topic and take that the same high importance as the technical topic.
Yeah, I mean, I think I know what you're talking about. When I visited your office last month, I mean, I saw you are prepared to celebrate.
Yeah, but we should do it more often, I think.
Ab-
There are so many small things that are happening. You work so hard for those achievements, and then it's happening, and you're like, okay, nice, we did it, and here's the next challenge, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that will never stop. We always have upcoming challenges, and that's okay. But it's also okay to sit down for half an hour or something, celebrate, and then have more energy for the next challenge.
Well, thank you very much, Mikey, for this insights. And I really enjoyed talking today with you and the experience you shared. And I wish you and all the cyclist team many, many small and big celebrations in the coming years. And I really look forward to talking to you again, maybe in a year, or maybe when you finish your pilot, you do your folk, and so that we can sit down and unpick the lessons from those. I mean, to share, because this what I find is that people either celebrate the success, which is good, as you noticed, and but or they try to say, okay, that technology didn't work or whatever. But actually, talking to founders who were in the trenches and understanding what works, what doesn't, is very rare. So I'm really looking forward to that and celebrating also with you this success. So thank you very much for coming over to the podcast.
Thank you very much also for the invitation to join you again. Looking forward to that. And it was a lot of fun for me. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Mike. It was fun for me as well. Good luck.
Bye.